Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on restoring manufacturing post COVID-19. My name is Anvita, and I'm the sub editor at Publish Industry India. This event is in association with the Sol Systems. Um, so we'll wait for another 5 minutes before we actually start with all the presentations. We'll let the attendees come in for another 5 minutes. Okay, so I guess we'll begin with the webinar. So while the world is going through unprecedented crisis due to COVID-19, the manufacturing industry is not disparate to it. Although manufacturing industries are slowly resuming its production, the new normal is still dubious. And even though for now, many industries have started their functioning with under the strict guidelines of their respective state governments, future functioning is still a big question for many. With all our discussions today, we aim to share knowledge on how manufacturing industries can restore its functioning smoothly post COVID-19. For the same, we have a very interesting presentation lined up for you. The presentation would begin with Mr. Arun Rao, who's the Senior Director Sales and Geostrategy at the Sol Systems. He would be discussing with you how industries are starting up now slowly, the challenges that manufacturers are facing to start their operation, probable solutions and techniques, and more. He would also be setting premises for the presentations following his, which would be by Mr. Kiran Divekar, who's the brand lead for Delmia India at the Sol Systems, and Mr. Bhavesh Kumar, who's the brand lead for Simulia India at the Sol Systems. While Mr. Divekar would be briefly covering how manufacturing operations would restart, keeping in mind social distancing, and how one can effectively mitigate the challenges in hand once factories restart, Mr. Kumar will throw light on simulation on two possible fronts. First, the possible scenario of virus spread, and second, the methods in which factories can modify their layout, which might make it easier for employees to and navigate, and how simulation can help in such a scenario. This would be followed by a panel discussion on this would be followed by a panel discussion deliberating on the implications of restarting factories post lockdown, the role of digitalization, new normals, and more. So before we begin with the sessions and the panel discussion, there are a few announcements for our audience. The audience can ask questions to their speakers throughout the session, and in the question box which is there on your screen, we would be collating the questions throughout the event, and we would be asking it to our speakers once all the sessions and the panel discussions are done. If you have any questions directed to any specific speaker of ours, please make sure to mention their name in the question box, and we will ask it to them directly. So also, we also have a some very interesting polls lined up for you, and we would be asking them between the sessions. You would have approximately 30 seconds in your hand to lodge all the answers, and so make sure you keep your attention to the screen and not miss out on the questions. Um, so before I hand it over to Mr. Rao, we will have our first poll question going live now. Like mentioned, you would have 30 seconds to mark your response to them, and the first question will be on your screen in another minute. So the first question is there on your screen. It's how do you think the current situation will affect the adoption of advanced technologies like digitalization and in manufacturing? You have two options in front of you. You can select one of them. The first option for you is adoption of advanced technologies will increase, and the second option is adoption of advanced technologies will decrease. You have 30 seconds in your hand to mark your answer. Um, okay. So we stop with the polls now. So 94% people think the adoption of advanced technologies will increase uh, in the current situation, and 6% people think that the adoption will decrease. Okay. So now I would like to invite Mr. Rao to carry out presentations for today. Mr. Rao's presentation would be followed by Mr. Devekar and then by Mr. Kumar. Over to you, Mr. Rao.
Thank you, Anvita. Good morning, all my fellow attendees, and thank you so much for taking time to have joined us for this interesting webinar today. As I move on to the next slide and begin my presentation, I just wanted to, I trust you're all doing very well. I know it's 60 plus days of lockdown, and this is where we've seen quite a lot of things that have happened. But as Mr. Rodolph Gilani had said, it is at the time of crisis that good leaders emerge. And I'm sure that all the leaders, the business leaders or manufacturing leaders who have joined this webinar would definitely step up to the need of the hour and show their leadership skills in order to get all the respective companies out of this crisis situation. So as we are approaching the 60 plus days of lockdown, we also see hope in the or light in the end of the tunnel. Next, you would also be able to see that there are a lot of factories that are basically tiptoeing back to work after India has lifted the lockdown. In some states, it's partial, etc. And we also see that many of the organizations, maybe Ashok Leyland, Endurance, Minda, quite a lot of them have already resumed their operations, and many of them are following. Next, as we see, when we saw the industry open, and we have seen it run for the last 2 weeks plus now, we've also seen some concerns arising. We saw some of the large plants, maybe Maruti or Hyundai, some of the workers have contracted the coronavirus, which is basically exposing some of the lacunas that is there when the business or the manufacturing setups are restarting. These are all the risks that is associated. And if you can see, there are not only this risks of exposure, but there are also various other challenges that we have seen coming up during this last 2 weeks. If I have to summarize based on some of the news snippets that I've seen, Honda has come on news saying that lack of manpower is hampering to the restart plans. This could be basically because of some of the migration workers moving out or some of the concerns that their existing employees may have in order to come back to work, etc. The other key challenge that we saw was the industry is actually grappling with some of the supply chain challenges as they look at restarting. I think supply chain is one of the key aspects that actually determines how the factories or how the manufacturing setup comes back to work, etc. In addition to that, there are a lot of new guidelines, new activities that is actually guidelines being dictated by government, which is put a lot of confusion amongst some of the workers or some of the organizations, etc. So if I have to sum up, what are the key challenges? I think as Anvita mentioned, manufacturing with the new normal, with the social distancing, with the new guidelines is kind of becoming kind of a challenge to many of our organizations. In addition to that, the changes in the demand, the changes in the way the supply has to come in, etc., is basically hampering some of the manufacturing setups to resume the business as usual kind of an approach, or taking the business as usual kind of an approach. The third thing is that with all these new things that is coming up, I think there is a need for innovation. There is a need for innovation, for sustainability, for resilience, etc. So these are the key elements that is actually going to ensure that the manufacturing will continue, the business must go on kind of a approach which most of the leaders are expecting. So this is where organization like Dassault Systems comes into picture. To give a snippet about what Dassault Systems is, I would like to go into the next video, which highlights what Dassault Systems is all about. Thank you. So we, Dassault Systems, are a 3D experience company, and we provide business and people with 3D experience universe to imagine sustainable innovations which is capable of harmonizing product, nature, and life. So this is our mission, which our CEO has actually shared with the world a couple of years ago. And we have actually created this 3D experience universe and have been in the market for over 3 decades now, bringing out different technologies at different period of time. So we have been providing the next generation softwares for many of our customers who are bringing the next generation of products to meet their customer needs. So right from 1981, where we conceptualized the 3D design, we actually were the creators of digital mockup in 1989. And thereafter, we coined the concept called as product lifecycle management in 1999. Thereafter, in 2012, we have developed the 3D experience platform, which, as I said earlier, is capable of harmonizing product, nature, and life. Next, while Dassault Systems softwares are quite popular in some of the core industries, you might be aware of some of the some of the news snippets that have come over the last few weeks about how Dassault Systems has created a lot of initiatives with its partners and clients to face the COVID-19 challenges, etc. So all these snippets are very well available in the public domain, etc. But I just wanted to move forward with some of the industry segments that we cater to, etc. So next, so Dassault Systems caters to about 11 industry segments, right from automotive, aerospace design, to industrial equipment, marine and offshore, high-tech, home and lifestyle, etc. While we cater to so many industries, 11 to be precise, today we wanted to actually share some of the key areas. The first one being the industrial engineering. Industrial engineering is a technology which helps or enables innovation and efficiency to be developed in the manufacturing or in the uh, organizations by taking care of planning, simulating, and modeling their global or the local operations. This comes with a brand of Dassault systems called as Delmia, which allows manufacturing and service providers to virtually experience their entire manufacturing operations, right from the impact of design to determining how the global demands can be met, etc. The second key topic is multi-physics simulation. So this comes with our brand called as Simulia, and Simulia delivers powerful simulations of made structures, fluids, multi-body, etc. And this is basically to take care of not only the simulation but also visualization techniques that are completely integrated to not only capture the process but also for publication of the data as well as reuse. So this is one of the key technologies which Dassault also provides. In addition to that, considering the supply chain needs, etc., Dassault also provides the planning and optimization techniques, which is really a powerful planning as well as scheduling and optimization tool for complex business processes, etc. So this can take care of not only the logistics, the transit, but also the workforce operations across all the planning horizons. So while we have numerous technologies, but today I wanted to bring in my two experts, technical experts, Kiran Divekar as well as Bhavesh, to talk more on these three technologies. With that said, I would pass on the mic to Kiran. Over to you, Kiran.
Thank you, Arun. Good morning, everyone. As Arun mentioned, I will be speaking on how manufacturing operations post COVID-19 is going to look like. I think social distancing is a word now which has become quite common in our day-to-day life. Right? So, but how is this going to affect my operational best practice where I still have to maintain a social distancing? And with all the things going around us with lack of workforce, social distancing, and so many other disruptions, how is this going to impact the production? And how can we even mitigate these workforce challenges? So these are some of the things which are in the mind as manufacturers are trying to reopen their factories and reopen their shop floors. So what are some of the key KPIs that is being looked at very uh, very importantly? One is, what is the optimum workforce load that I should have on my shop floor, keeping in mind the social distancing norms. At the same time, if I have to do a ramp up, because we know that the factories are slowly opening up and slowly the productions are increasing, which means there is a need to ramp up. So how do I make sure that I have the optimum workforce, keeping in mind my validation and my ramp up strategy? Secondly, what is the impact that I'm having because of this shortage of workers on the production? Okay. So does this mean that I need some additional shifts, or does it mean I have to reduce my shift, or does it mean I have to have a staggered shift, for example, or does it mean I probably have to reduce the time between two shifts or reduce the break times, things like that. And another scenario, which may not be very common, but if I have to even make some small changes to the layout, because we all understand that it's not easy to just go ahead and make a change in the layout because it's a costly affair. But if there is room for us to make a small change in the layout so that it helps me in becoming more efficient and more productive, can I do that? So how do we evaluate some of these KPIs? Next. So this is where the digital technologies will help. For example, the video what you're seeing here is a very simple example of a what if scenario, because we have seen the government regulating that factories should probably open only with 1/3 the capacity. So if I only have 33% of my worker capacity, then how is it going to impact my productivity? Now, if you see the simulation which is running on the left side, so this is my current as is, wherein I have 9 stations and I have 9 workers who are doing the job. Now I can do a simulation a simulation for 8 hours, 16 hours, for the full day, 3 shifts. And then I can, of course, evaluate different KPIs, like what is the asset utilization I'm doing, how much of throughput I'm getting, are there any bottleneck areas, which you are seeing in the indicators on the left side. And at the end of the day, after I did all my simulations, let's say I have arrived at my productivity before COVID was about 2000 components per shift. But now with a 33% worker capacity, what I have, how is my production going to look like? And if you see the simulation, which is running on the right hand side, now it's the same set of stations because my stations are not reducing. My work content is not reducing, but I only have 3 workers, right? So now how do I manage this? What is the impact that it is going to have on my production? So when I do this kind of a what if simulations and when I do a study, I'm seeing that my productivity has reduced to about 760 jobs per shift, right? So this is a very simple use case, but this is how you can leverage technologies to arrive at running multiple what if simulations, multiple what if scenarios to make sure that at the end of the day, you have a very agile and efficient manufacturing system on your shop floor. Next. So what is the solution that Dassault Systems has for this? So Delmia is the brand, as Arun was mentioning, that provides with all this simulation software for manufacturing applications. So with the Delmia Industrial Engineer application, you can create a 3D digital twin of either it could be a work cell, it could be a station, it could be a line, or it could be a whole factory itself, right? So once I have created this 3D layout of my factory from the scratch, where I have just used my 2D drawings and then I have extrapolated and created these 3D models, then I can do all these different what if scenarios. The example what I showed in my previous slide to see how I can optimize material flow, how I can improve my productivity, so on and so forth. So with that, I will pass on now to Bhavesh, who is going to speak of how the simulation is going to help in the operations post COVID-19. Bhavesh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kiran. Let me extend, what Kiran has said through the use of multi-physics simulation. Simulation is not a new technology; it has been around for decades. But in the post-COVID world, multi-physics is actually playing a very important role to ensure that office spaces as well as factories, are safe for everyone. The next slide. One of the basic requirements for a multi-physics simulation would actually be the environment itself, the 3D layout. And with the 3D experience platform that Arun talked about, this is something which is very easy to set up. And in fact, the factory layout that Kiran talked about is something that could simply be reused for any simulation itself. In the next slide, what I would like to do is to take you through some common scenarios of where a multi-physics simulation plays a role. So here what you're seeing is the propagation of particles within an open space. And this is a standard setup that most offices would have. And the question is, how fast and how much do particles spread? And Kiran talked about the use of simulation for what if scenarios. And this is exactly what we are going to do now. What if I add a wall in the middle of an open space? Will that help reduce the spread? So in the next slide, we look at that kind of an alternative. Sometimes setting up not a wall, but at least a partition would not be a very difficult thing to achieve. And as you could see here, we run the same simulation, and adding a wall actually reduces the exposure. It slows down the spread of pathogen, and the average exposure is reduced by about 10%. Of course, this could still be improved, and we are going to look at some other scenarios as well. So in the next slide, we are going to spread a little more, and we are going to see, what happens within a floor. Again, here what you are looking at is a standard setup, and we know that there are distancing rules that are put in place. But what happens, when there is a pathogen or particles that go from one end to the other, which means that people who are walking in the corridor are exposed. And in this particular scenario, at the top right, you would see that there is a reception and the particles travel all the way across that. Again, there is a what if question here. What if we try to modify the ventilation of the floor, right? So if we look at the next slide, what we are doing here is a simple setup, which is adding a fan at one end of the corridor. And once that is done, we could see that the risk of exposure at the reception is almost zero. And what is more, we could use visualization like this to provide confidence to everybody in the office, our employees or workers, to ensure that, look, this is the type of risk assessment that you have, despite what type of layout we have. We could assure them that that they are safe within the work environment. Now, we looked at an open space and a floor. In the next slide, what we will consider is propagation within a plant. And this would be the same layout, for example, that Kiran would use for the manufacturing scenario. But in this case, we are looking at a standard ventilation. And there is a physical distancing norm that we all know about, but there is also a possibility that small particles flow to other workstations. Now, again, can we do a simple thing, which is, what if we add walls around the working stations? Will that help? So in the next slide, we consider using simple walls. By walls here, I mean simple partitions. And that does create a positive impact on the air quality. It removes the bigger peaks, which means that, people wearing masks, for example, would be very less prone to any contact with the infection. But at the same time, can we look at something a little more? What if we try to modify the ventilation balance, right? So if we look at the next slide, we're modifying the ventilation balance. And if this is a possibility, then it reduces the average particle exposure by more than 90%. So in short, this is exactly where multi-physics simulation is sort of being reinvented in the post-COVID scenario, to ensure that we are safe, and also using the visualization that is today available to even get that confidence to the people around. Now, there is another aspect that I would like to talk about simulation. So in the next slide, what I'm talking about here is something that simulation technology has been used for, all in this past. We know that simulation has been used to create better products, to come up with better design alternatives, and also to reduce costs, time to market, and so on. So one aspect that I would like to talk about in the post-COVID world is, how does simulation help in reducing cost, and why is this important? In the next slide, we talk about what would be the typical contribution to the costs in an organization, right? Of course, this could vary from organization to organization. But there is a lot of cost that is associated with the materials, because those are the ones that are used for production. But not just materials, it could include assembly operations, it could include tools, tooling, it could include warranty costs, engineering, and so on. And if we go to the next slide, one of the advantages of looking at simulation is that simulation pervades everywhere. Simulation can be used not just to test the product performance, but it can be used all the way up front, from the requirements to the functional and logical specifications, to physical modeling, to manufacturing operations, some of which we have seen now, as well as to in-service conditions. And at all stages, simulation can help in reducing the costs, because this is going to become very important in the post-COVID world. So in the next slide, what I'm doing is very briefly talking about what are the technologies associated with simulation that helps in reducing cost. Alternate materials, this is something that most companies always look at, because it helps them reduce cost. Additive manufacturing and 3D printing are becoming more common. We have seen a lot of usage, especially in the last couple of months. And one of the things that gives confidence to people using simulation is the use of realistic physics. If the results are not good, then people will not have confidence in simulation. And this is something today is no longer a problem. People use realistic physics everywhere. And with the advent of HPC and cloud, it has just become more flexible and easily available. Optimization to ensure that the products provide the right performance at the right cost. Many of you would have heard about what is called as left shifting of simulation, which means the use of simulation more and more upfront in the product design cycle, maybe by designers, to ensure that we get more value out of simulation. And finally, simulation is never used alone. It is always used with testing and prototyping. And simulation technologies can help in planning, scheduling, and therefore making the testing and prototyping process more efficient. So with that, I will end my talk on the multi-physics simulation part and hand it over to Kiran.
Thank you, Bhavesh. Yes, so we could really understand the power of simulations, both in the shop floor as well as from a product standpoint. So let me now touch upon the planning and optimization. Bhavesh briefly touched upon, how planning, optimization, scheduling are also important aspects as we get into the post-COVID era with the manufacturing and operations. Next, please. So one of the key challenges all the manufacturing companies today are grappling with is the supply chain challenges, right? Because of the disruptions in the transportation, because of disruption in the imports, because of disruptions in the workforce. This has really led to a lot of challenges for the OEMs who are not able to get the materials from the suppliers, and for the tier 1 suppliers who are in turn relying on the tier 2 suppliers, they are not able to get the material. So which means the whole value chain is today struggling because of the critical supply chain challenges. So what are some of the challenges, if I may list out? One is, as an OEM, as a plant head, or as a manufacturing head, I really want to know what is the stocks that I have, and more importantly, a clear visibility of the incoming supplies. And with all this disruption, and if I don't have a clear visibility of my supplies, that means what I'm going to produce is also going to get impacted. So which means, how do I take care of my unpredictable demand, and how do I take care of my supply shortages? And this means if I don't have a digital way of handling things, or if I don't have a common platform to do this, then we will have to resort to a very silo based approach, which means the PPC guy may be planning something in his Excel sheet, whereas the raw materials and the stores guys is probably working in his own Excel sheet in his own world. And if there is no synchronization between the production planning and control guy and the stores and the raw materials guy, then obviously this is going to have a downstream impact when the production starts. And with connectivity also being an issue, reacting very quickly to such situations is just adding to the challenges of the critical supply chain, what we are seeing. Next, please. So what is the solution? So how can we help organizations prepare for the tomorrow with all these supply chain challenges? So with Delmia Quintech, which is basically a planning and optimization tool that is within the Dassault portfolio, we have a module which is Supply Planner, which is typically helping to address the strategic planning processes, balancing your supplies, balancing your demands forecast, so on and so forth. So what does this enable the manufacturers? So you have a very good visibility of your supply chain across different horizons. It could be from daily to weekly to a monthly horizon. And what this means is, my inventory planning is quite efficient, right? Because if my demand is unpredictable, then how do I really do my inventory planning, right? So this is where the digital technologies can help you to make sure that you have a very optimal inventory planning, so that you have a good visibility for both your immediate needs as well as your short-term demand. Okay, and one of the biggest advantage with the Quintech Supply Planner is the way we have designed the solution is the implementation is rapid. So what we have offered to the market now is implementation within about 3 to 4 weeks of time. Okay, because the challenges have to be solved now. It's not something that we want to solve 6 months down the line. So which means the implementation really has to be quick. We have to be nimble in what we are doing, and it has to be rapid so that we are able to solve these supply chain challenges, the supply chain modeling challenges, with starting immediately. Next, please. The second challenge which we are seeing post-COVID in manufacturing operations is workforce. I think we are all now very familiar with the image, what you see on the right hand side, right? With so much of exodus happening of the migrant workers to their respective villages, to their respective states, as the shop floors are opening, there will be a huge challenge to see how I can find the right workforce with the right skills to make sure that my production goes on, right? At the same time, with whatever workforce we have, we should also see that, okay, with this minimal staff I have, how can I still meet the demand? How can I, the fluctuation is demand that is coming, whether it's a high demand, low demand. So what is the optimal staff that I need so that my production runs efficiently? And with work from home becoming a very common norm these days, what is the kind of skill sets that I need on my shop floor? So how do I upskill my workforce, or how do I make sure that my workforce is now not limited just to one aspect what they were doing in the past, but maybe enhance their skills to cover more areas? And last but not least, everyone today is worried about their jobs, right? But how do I make sure that I still keep the employment, maybe with the reduced workforce or reduced hours of working, but I still make sure that I keep everyone employed? So these are some of the challenges which the manufacturers are facing as they open up their factories. So how does Dassault System plan to help these organizations? Next, please. So again, with the Delmia Quintic, which I just explained in the previous chart about supply chain planning, we also have a workforce planner module. Okay? So what this does is it enables you to digitally model the best and the worst case demand scenarios and make sure that you have the most optimal plan for your current and future workforce requirements. So what it does is it makes sure that with whatever skill sets you have, and taking into account all the different constraints. For example, people are not able to travel in metros because metros are still not opened up, right? So that is one constraint. And for those who have children at home, because the schools are still shut down, they are not able to come to the factories, right? So we have all these different constraints which still has to be respected. So how do we make sure that keeping all these constraints in mind, we still arrive at the most optimal staffing levels with the right skill sets to make sure that I have the right job profiles on my shop floor without impacting my manufacturing and still helping me to be agile when I'm manufacturing, right? And gain visibility of all the required work, what employees are available, what are their skills. So this is typically the challenge which workforce planner intends to address. So what I have covered is supply chain challenges and workforce challenges. Of course, these both of them go hand in hand a lot of times, but as part of Delmia Quintic, we do have dedicated applications which are designed to solve these specific problems. With that, I end my presentation on planning and optimization. And Arun, back to you.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Bhavesh. I think your presentation summed up the key topics that we were discussing, which is industrial engineering, multi-physics simulation, as well as planning and optimization. With this, we would like to conclude the presentation part of it, but I would like to give the mic back to Anvita for some more poll questions and also to take forward this session. Over to you, Anvita.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Rao, for that session. It was indeed a very insightful session, highlighting the solutions for employee health and safety, which is of absolute absolute necessity once the factories begin. And Mr. Divekar said it so aptly that the challenges have to be solved right now. So moving on, again I would like to thank all our three speakers, Mr. Divekar, Mr. Rao, and Mr. Kumar. And moving on now, before we head to the panel discussion, we have a poll question for all our audience. Can we have the poll questions on screen, please? Okay. So the second poll question for our audience is: do you see the need of remote monitoring of plant performance? Do you foresee the need of remote monitoring of plant performance go up with dashboards, illustration, various KPIs on mobile? So your KPIs, being quality, inventory, throughput, etc. So do you see the need for it going up? You have two options. Your first option is yes, and the second option is no. You have 30 seconds to lodge your answers. Okay, can we have the results for the poll out? So 92% people feel that yes, the remote monitoring of plant performance will go up, and only 7% feel that it wouldn't. So, okay. So now, since we are done with all our presentations, we will be moving on to our panel discussion. The panel discussion would be moderated by Mr. Shekhar Jirkar. He's the chief editor and publisher at Publish Industry India. The panel discussion would be discussing the implications of restarting your manufacturing operations amid social distancing, the role of digitalization moving forward, and the ideal approach for the new normal and actionable strategy. Over to you, Mr. Shekhar.
Yeah, thanks, Anvita. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here along with the DESO team and the attendees. So with COVID-19 evolving at a very unprecedented speed and scale, the manufacturing companies have been grappling with its immediate impact, as both their production and supply chain operations are being disrupted. And not only theirs, even their customers and suppliers' own operations are also facing the similar challenges. So as you must have seen in earlier presentation, Mr. Arun Rao and Mr. Kiran Divekar, as well as Mr. Bhavesh, they have already explained what kind of challenges normally the manufacturing professionals will face going forward when they start operations. Since last week, many of the manufacturing companies, they have already resumed in some of the areas, partly or fully. And such kind of situation demands production companies think and act differently and look at the new normal, which Anvita was also talking about, for best practices in product development, for best practices in production, the research and development, the supply chain distribution, sales and marketing, and in lot many fields. So many manufacturers today are struggling to maintain operation levels when the most critical resource, which is people, they have been constrained by the much needed social distancing norms. So looking at this scenario, adjusting operations in real time, that really calls for a new approach to everything we do. So be it the products we manufacture, be the processes we use, the safety measures we follow, the technologies which we deploy, the way we respond to market requirements, and the way we communicate with each other. And most importantly, the manner we manage workforce in the current situation. And that too, that everything comes under the cost pressure, because the demand is now is becoming very uncertain. It may surge because of the 2-3 months of lockdown period, or it may remain flat. So looking at these challenges and looking at the current scenario, I'm happy to have this panel discussion along with the DESO team, the restoring manufacturing operations post COVID-19. So with this, I invite all the panelists, panel speakers here, Mr. Arun Rao, Mr. Kiran Divekar, and Mr. Bhavesh Kumar. So my first question to Arun, how can the Indian manufacturing organizations be better prepared while restarting manufacturing operations with the constraint of social distancing, the number of people on the job, the safety norms, the supply chain disruptions, and most importantly, the cost reduction pressure? I know you already briefed it, some of the part of this. So we would like to have more elaboration on that.
Sure. Thank you, Shekhar. I think these questions have kind of become more and more vocal these days. And I was just reading an article by one of the eminent CIO of a large company. And I think what message that he was giving was very clear that in order to overcome the current situation, I think technology will play a very, very key role. And it is just not the technology, it is going ahead and trying to leverage the concept of digitalization to the maximum possible extent. And as you might have seen in the presentations that was made not only by me, but also by my colleagues Kiran and Bhavesh, they highlighted as to how the technology can play a very important role in order to mitigate or understand some of the challenges that the organizations are facing and how digitally they can overcome it. And I think Kiran also highlighted how it is a matter of a few hours or few weeks in order to basically take care of such of simulations or such kind of digitization that will benefit all the manufacturing as well as all the OEMs in general. So this is going to be the key, Shekhar.
Okay. As you mentioned, there have been some manufacturing operations after starting they had to stop because of the virus spread. In the Maruti it happened, in Hyundai also it happened, and there were a couple of cases where the manufacturing companies they have to stop operation or they reduce the operation because of the non-availability of the people, because of the migrant workers and people not comfortable in joining the office because of the scare of the virus spread. So in that scenario, what would be your advice to the manufacturers, that whether they should continue with the manufacturing operations as usual with a lesser number of people along with the technology, or they have to look for some other alternative?
No, I think it is a calculated risk or calculated activities that the organizations would have to do. There are ways and means wherein the organization can actually motivate their employees to come back or to take up the manufacturing, etc. But at the end of the day, it would all depend upon how is it that they can maximize their production or maximize their utilization of the people with the given set of resources that they have. And this is where I think the companies would have to work over the next few weeks and take care of the guidelines as well as the employee safety, etc. So this is going to be the key, Shekhar. I think working under the given circumstances, working under the current situation is going to be the need of the hour, at least for the next few weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I will come to Mr. Kiran Devekar now. Kiran, we were talking about a lot of emerging technologies in your presentations, yours and you and Bhavesh. So what would be the role of these emerging technologies, including this contactless manufacturing and simulation, etc., going forward in continuing the business with the same efficiency and profitability as earlier? Because these technologies were there earlier as well, and now with post COVID-19, these technologies will have some different role to play, or they will have the same role to play, or what should be the approach towards the deployment of these advanced technologies in the current situation?
Yeah, sure. I will take that question first. As you rightly said, these technologies were always there, right? But now with the COVID-19 and social distancing and touchless manufacturing becoming a norm, I think usage of technology is going to be a lot more important than what it was in the past. Let me give you a couple of examples. In the past, if I go to a shop floor, it was very common for us to see people crowded on the shop floor around a whiteboard discussing things, right? Or if you go to any conference rooms, it's used to be a crowded conference room where people are discussing on topics. But now with this social distancing in the picture, it's not going to be so easy, right? So, but business must go on, right? I can't stop the business. So this is where technologies will help. There is a need to still collaborate, but if I can't do a face-to-face meeting, then how can I use technologies for doing a remote collaboration, right? I may still be working from home, but how can I still collaborate with my colleagues who are either in their shop floor or in their respective homes to make sure that the business goes on. Okay? The other example, what I said again was part of my presentation was how these simulations can be used to be more agile and nimble in your manufacturing. We all know the reality is workforce shortage is going to be there at least for a few more months till the reverse migration happens. But given this condition, how can I still leverage technologies? These technologies existed before, but now I'm repurposing it for a different reason. I'm repurposing it for a different kind of study, wherein, okay, I simulate with a lesser manforce, so on and so forth. And lastly, supply chain, right? Supply chain people have been doing it using Excel, but that needs a very close collaboration. I have to probably go in front of the guy and talk to him, hey, how do I solve this particular challenge? This supplier is not giving, what should I do? But now more focus coming on, how I can have a local supply chain, right? I probably want to source it locally. So how can I really design a very efficient supply chain in my manufacturing system using digital technologies, right? Because the need of collaborate still exists. So I think technology is going to play a very important role. And lastly, on your question, how these technologies should be deployed, I think cloud is the way to go, right? Because now, if you're looking at on-premise, that is still going to add more workload on your IT people to administer this, to maintain these systems. But most of the technologies these days are available on cloud. Okay, so that really reduces your manpower needs for the organizations, and it really gives you the benefit of not having to worry about the hardware, infrastructure costs, and so on and so forth. So I think the cloud approach probably is the best way to go forward as companies are reopening after the post-COVID.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to ask Bhavesh also. With respect to the technologies which Kiran mentioned, so as you mentioned, the approach also will change towards the deployment of these technologies. But under the current situation where there is a cost pressure, heavy cost pressure to the manufacturer, and and every manufacturer will definitely want to have the higher productivity as well as manage the shop floor performance at the same time. So how to make that smart change in manufacturing so as to ensure to balance the cost pressure as well as the performance?
Sure, and I would also like to reiterate what Kiran said, which is that in the post-COVID scenario, I only foresee simulation usage increasing exponentially. And I was glad that, in the first poll, we had an overwhelming confirmation of that from the audience as well, in a sense that advanced technologies will only see an increase. So like you also said, simulation has been around for a number of years. Simulation has been used in the past to come up with better design, better alternatives. But there is one area which simulation has also been used for specifically, which is to drive cost reduction. And cost reduction, as you said, will be the focus all throughout, whether it is in terms of increasing the throughput, making our processes more efficient and things like that. But this also means that simulation has to be used and has to be integrated well with manufacturing, testing, and other functions within the organization. And this is to ensure that any recommendation that simulation gives in terms of cost reduction is actually feasible. So we obviously do not want a scenario where a simulation itself comes up with a really great design, but it cannot be manufactured within the setup that we have today. So the essential point is that the impact of simulation has to reach across the organization. Sometimes what happens is that simulation becomes a more engineering tool to ensure that certain designs work as designed or perform as designed. And the shift that we need to see, especially in the post-COVID scenario, is that any cost reduction initiative that simulation comes up with has to align with the manufacturing objectives as well as the business objectives. And this is something which is already happening. I would say that it would be a more steep upturn in the adoption of simulation technologies. One good example I can give is the use of 3D printing. 3D printing has been allowed, has been around for at least a decade now, and it is a good example of combining design, simulation, and manufacturing very seamlessly. Because with 3D printing, most designs start just from the function that you want. And once you get the functional design, the next step is to make sure that it is right. It is the right design. That's where simulation comes up. So what today is happening is that simulation has also become accessible to a lot more people. It is because of cloud, for example. Kiran talked about that, which makes availability of infrastructure much easier. It's more flexible, and the use of a collaborative platform like the 3D experience platform, which brings everyone on board. So I feel that simulation is more mainstream than ever today, even with technologies such as additive manufacturing and IoT. And I only see simulation being used more and more in manufacturing.
Okay. Yeah, with this then there comes the question of the new normal for both the manufacturing leaders as well as the frontline teams who are working on the shop floor to develop the new capabilities and skills. So I will come to Kiran now. So how to take care of this training and skill development or the skill upgradation in the current scenario so as to accelerate the capability building process and also adjust the operations in real time with the required productivity levels.
Yeah, I think you brought out a very important point, Shekhar. I think skilling, upskilling, and reskilling, I think is going to be much more important. Training has always been there. People have always been getting trained, but now it has become much more important. And one good news, if I may say, that COVID-19 has brought us is now we are all working from home. So my commuting time is less, especially if you're in a place like Bombay, Bangalore, where significant time is lost on the road. Now we have all this. Exactly. Now there are a lot of online training which is available, right? So people can benefit from this, and they can get themselves skilled from working from home. So skilling is very important, more so in the post-COVID-19 situation. Now, if I look at why organizations want to focus on this skilling and reskilling, there are a few points that comes to my mind. One is increase in productivity, right? As my workforce is decreasing, more is expected of whoever is there on the shop floor. If a person was doing X amount of work, now probably he has to do 1.5x amount of work, which means he may have to do something very new. If you recollect the video I was showing, where 9 stations but still 3 workers, now that one worker has to do the job of what the other 2 guy was doing, right? He has to upskill himself to learn that, right? So that's one area how skilling can help in productivity. The second one is more and more we are seeing cross-functional teams being formed, which means it's not sufficient if I'm skilled just to do one job, but maybe I will have to contribute in other areas. So that way I'm helping the organizations, and I'm also helping my own personal development, because now I'm learning more things, doing things more than what I was. I'm going outside of my comfort zone, right? So and again here, skilling is very important. From an organization standpoint, why skilling is needed? You have to retain the talent. It's very important, right? Because if you want to retain the top talent, keep them motivated. So keep them skilling on new things and work from home and all these things. And these platforms are really there for it to come up to speed. And last but not least, it is making the business prepare for the future. Who knows? How long this COVID will continue and what new things will come. So you are really making your business proof ready by making sure that you are skilling whatever existing workforce you have with the right things that is needed to make your manufacturing agile, efficient, and increase your productivity.
Okay. So now that comes with the last question, that once we discuss about what challenges the manufacturers might be facing or currently facing, and what kind of our approach towards the manufacturing processes, the workforce, the supply chain, the distribution, marketing, etc. and the technologies which we are going to deploy. And of course, the last question about the skill development. So now there comes the question. So in short, what would be the attributes of a winning plan for navigating the industry post-pandemic? Because the immediate actionable strategies and the road ahead to turn this disruption into opportunity for India to emerge as a manufacturing destination for the world. So I will ask this question to Arun. In
So
short,
thanks,
just
Shaker.
make some recommendations for the manufacturers.
Absolutely.
We have to deal with the virus. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I think the virus is going to stay for some more time, even I mean till the new vaccine is developed, etc. But till then, I don't recommend breakthrough strategy. I'd probably suggest that most of the industry captains are looking for three things. The first and foremost is employee well-being, because if their employees are hale and hearty, safe and sound, they would definitely come to the shop floor or they'll come to their manufacturing setup, and that is when we can look at actually having a better productivity out of them. This is going to be the key first strategy that any business leader would want to adopt. The second key thing, as you rightly said, this is going to probably stay for some more time. We do not know how long. So it is very, very essential that most of the industry captains look at saving costs. And saving costs, as both Kiran as well as Bhavesh mentioned, is going to be really, really essential in order to take care of their current liquidity, etc. And also to make sure that they are able to control or have a check on their balance sheet so that they will be able to take care of all the eventualities that probably may come. And this is where there would be a lot of innovation that would be needed, etc. The third key winning plan or the third key activity in their strategy would be to take care of the risk management. I know as business leaders, we all have a risk mitigation plan, etc. But the risk management in this case would be to see how you would be able to recover, how you would be able to respond to the current situation, and how you would be able to plan for the future. Because whatever has happened now, there could be a chance, God forbid, there could be a chance that it can reoccur. What is going to be my plan in order to sustain my productivity or my production? How can I build a resilient system so that I can actually take care of this is going to be really critical. And to me, Shekhar, if these three strategies or three topics are taken care, I'm sure that there is a huge opportunity that is opening up for India as a country. And I'm sure that we'll be able to tap into it in a much better way.
Yeah, let's keeping our fingers crossed. So thanks to all of you for sharing your insights. It was pretty well elaborated and articulated. So in short, the manufacturing companies now must act to preserve the integrity of their business and protect their people at the same time, and also prepare for ramping up their operations and do some future plannings which can suit to the future conditions which may anticipate. Because currently the demand is also uncertain, the market is uncertain. It's all over the world. It's not just India. So wherever you go, you will find there's uncertain demand. So we should have that flexibility to work in the changing scenarios. So with that, I conclude the panel discussion. I thank to each one of you for your very valuable insights and making the discussion interactive and very interesting to the users, to the attendees. I will hand it over to Anvita now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jitkar, and thank you all our panelists for that insightful session. Before I start summarizing the event, a small announcement for our audience. In case you have any questions for our speakers, you can go to the in the chat section to the question box and write your questions over there. Mr. Jitkar will be asking it after the summary of the panel discussion to our speakers. Okay. So again, thank you for that very insightful session, Mr. Jitkar, Mr. Rivekar, Mr. Kumar, and Mr. Rao. And you very rightly said it that there is a need for motivation to maximize production at this given point. And if we take care of our employees and keep in mind all the risk management and plan for the future, that is only when India can have excel in all the opportunities that they are going to come across. So again, very insightful session and very quite rightful things said during the session. So before I hand it over to Mr. Chitkar for all the Q&A, there is one last poll question for our audience. Can we have the poll up on the screen, please? So the third poll question for our audience is, do you think cloud adoption in engineering and manufacturing functions in industry will increase post-COVID-19? Your options are yes and no. You have 30 seconds to lodge your answers. Okay, can we please have the answers on the screen? So 88% people think that yes, cloud adoption in engineering and manufacturing industry will increase post COVID-19, and 12% people think that it wouldn't. So now I would like to let Mr. Shekhar Chitkar take over for the Q&A and ask our speakers questions.
Yeah, sure. There are some questions. There is first question. The digital twin is a buzzword now. So what it means exactly? The question is from Mr. Suhas Bendale. So anyone can answer about the digital twin?
Yeah, I can answer that. I will answer it in the perspective of manufacturing, and maybe Bhavesh can add it from a simulation standpoint. See, when we say digital twin, virtual twin, we call it as 3D experience twin. What it really means is I'm creating a digital replica of my actual shop floor, right? So creating a virtual factory, but it's not just a static model. So when we say digital twin, it's not just limited to me creating a 3D model out of it and doing something. It also means how I can take decisions based on that, which means if I do something on the shop floor, how the real-time data, how I can feed it back to my virtual data, which I have created, so that I can take decisions based on that. Otherwise, it just becomes a static 3D factory layout, right? But when I'm saying a digital twin, what that means is from the real time, I'm also making use of that, pushing that data back to my virtual data, what I have created, so that it helps me in my decision-making process. So that's really the concept of digital twin when it comes to the shop floor and when it comes to manufacturing.
Okay. Yeah, there is one question.
Yeah, if I may just clarify a little bit, Shekhar, it's a very important question. It's a very important piece of technology that Kiran highlighted, the concept of digital twin or 3D experience twin. The whole idea here is to see how you can actually create or replicate all the scenarios in your digital environment or in your software, in your computer, so that you can do all these tests. And it is very important in the current situation because the guidelines are changing, the situations are changing very dynamically, and in order to predict this, you would definitely need to basically have a digital twin so that you can conduct the experiments, verify it, and once you are sure that this is going to work, you can actually test it, or you can actually put it into production in the shop floor.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is what we call it as clinical precision, in which it can be done.
Okay. Fine. The next question is from Mr. Sridhar Ramarao. Whether all those whatever technologies you presented just now, technology solutions, whether all the manufacturing companies can afford to have these technologies in their operations? He represents MSME probably. So how affordable it is for MSME in the current situation?
Okay, so I would like to take that. First of all, as I think Bhavesh and Kiran also mentioned, These are the technologies that have been existing for quite a few years now. However, as Bhavesh rightly said, this is kind of now repackaged in this session today to share how the technology our technology or these technologies can be benefiting most of the manufacturers. When I say in India, many of our customers or there are a lot of customers who are already using this. And when I say customers, it could be the large OEMs as well as the SMEs as well as MSMEs. So these technologies are already available and are being used. However, one of the key aspects that used to be there even in the past was how could some of the MSMEs can also get benefited, etc. So the first thing is we have the solutions now available in cloud, which makes, as Kiran said, makes the ownership, the usability of these softwares more affordable, more easy to use, etc. So that is one of the key things. Second, we have also been working with many of the institutes who work very closely with SMEs as well as MSMEs, and we've been trying to position the softwares through such organizations. And I think these are the ways wherein Dassault Systems India is looking at making sure that these softwares are not only usable, but also can be leveraged by many of the organizations here in India.
Okay. Yeah, the next question is from Mr. Nitin Kulkarni. Would like to know in brief about the model of Delmia, which serves virtual installation and commissioning of stamping press. It's very specific to stamping press.
Yes. So in our 3D experience platform, now we have come out with an offering for virtual commissioning. And when it comes to stamping, yes, we do cover now in our new platform solutions the processes of stamping, and even for example with our robotics, the pick and place, because in any stamping process what happens is the robot plays a key role in placing it and then picking it. And so these kind of simulations can anyway be done with our robotic solutions, which has always existed. But with the platform, which is the new breed of solutions which we have launched in the market, now we are also able to do the virtual commissioning for this.
Okay. Next is from Mr. Anand Prakash. As different companies are using different softwares, tools, modules, how Dassault Systems is compatible or open to interface when any company want few modules to interface? You understood, or I will repeat?
It would be good if you could repeat that again, Shekhar, please.
Okay. Whether all the sorry, that is the next question. As different companies are using different softwares and tools and modules, how Dassault System is compatible or open to interface with other modules which the company is already using?
Can I take that, Arun? You want to answer that?
Yes, please go ahead, Kiran.
Yeah, so 3D experience platform is quite open, okay, because this is a very common situation we come across, wherein a prospective may be using a non-CATIA as their CAD system, or they may even be using a non-Dassault system as their PLM backbone, right? But thanks to the openness which we have as part of the 3D experience platform, we are able to integrate with these external systems through dedicated adapters, which has been developed by R&D, and we are that way compatible with whatever other CAD, other systems that organizations might be using. But at the same time, 3D experience platform can coexist, and we can bring additional value which may be lacking in the other systems which are currently being used.
Yeah, there is also an extension of this question. Whether it's compatible with the SAP MFG Pro 2 and with other PLCs of different OEMs or different drafting tools like AutoCAD or Primavera.
If I can answer that, so as Kiran mentioned, Shekhar, we are talking about 3D experience platform. It's a business platform. So unlike in the past where we used to have pointed solutions that used to basically take care of the needs of one department or one division or one domain, the platform basically brings the capability wherein all the different solutions are actually brought together so that it can take care of any organization's need. So we have gone much beyond the days where we were looking at solutions, pointed solutions, etc. But the platform is basically a holistic approach where it can take care of all these things. So second, I think as Kiran rightly mentioned, in addition to the solutions that we actually provide from our own portfolio, the platform, 3D experience platform is very well equipped in order to take care of the data coming from the other solutions. It could be SAP, it could be the other solutions you rightly mentioned. So there is this interoperability that is actually getting built in within the platform so that we are able to, or the organization are able to reuse or reuse some of those technologies rather than reinvesting, etc. So the platform is capable for that.
Okay. Yeah, this is quite interesting question. It's from Miss Hema. So a lot of businesses currently need immediate movements to survive. And while all of that, what we were talking about in terms of technology solutions or current needs is certainly important and effective. But what important today is the time taken to deploy or to implement these technologies, because currently all of them they need the immediate solution. So how will you address that?
I can probably answer for manufacturing. If you notice the presentations, what I made, the first one was the shop floor simulation, doing the what if scenarios with a 1/3 of the workforce. So as Arun rightly mentioned, we have kept in mind that there is an immediate need for these kind of solutions. It has to be done now and not 6 months down the line. So Dassault is offering a lot of packages, I should say, solution packages, working with a lot of our partner ecosystem, wherein we will come and implement the solution based on the specific needs you may have on the shop floor. And this is all hosted on the cloud. So the investments from the companies is that way hardware, all this they don't have to worry about. And we offer this as a service. So that means employees of the organization don't have to worry about learning these new tools because that obviously is going to take time. So we will come, we will do all the work, we will offer this as a service. So this really helps you in ramping up so that you will have the solution up and running maybe in a month or two, so that it can be used with immediate effect. The same thing goes for the supply chain planning and the workforce planning, and it was part of my presentation too. Rapid implementation is the key because that's something which we want to tackle with immediate effect. Even on that front, so we have launched what we call as the emergency solutions, wherein we will come, we will do the implementations, host it on the cloud, so that the solution should be up and running in a matter of weeks.
Okay.
And I can add, just my perspective on the simulation side, extending what Kiran said. So first of all, with the 3D experience platform on the cloud, the platform itself is available for immediate use, right? And secondly, if you look at using simulation technologies for cost reduction, how could we do that much faster? Now, this is where what we have done is we have taken our global expertise in different industries, and we have come up with what we call as industry process experiences. And these are essentially the best methods, the standard methods, which could be deployed immediately. And because we are doing it on the platform, on the cloud, if somebody would like to reduce costs in terms of looking at alternative materials or looking at alternative designs, that know-how that is required is something that we can provide immediately. And like what Kiran said, it could be through a direct engagement, it could be through our ecosystem of consulting partners as well. So in that sense, even from a simulation perspective, it's something that where you could see an immediate benefit.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I think there are many more questions, but I will just take the last question due to interest of time. So there has been a lot of discussions and presentations and talk on the manufacturing technologies required or solutions required for manufacturing processes. But what about the maintenance practices? Because currently, when we start, I think the manufacturing operations, the maintenance is the immediate requirement. So how will you address the maintenance requirement?
So Kiran, you want to take that?
Yes, I
Or
was
I
waiting
can
to
start.
see if,
You can.
yeah, you
You
can
can
start and
add
I
to
will.
it. Perfect, perfect. So, Shekhar, the solution that we highlighted, the Delmia brand, is not only useful for simulating, it is also helpful for a lot of planning activities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So this could be not only for the new product development planning, etc., or manufacturing planning, but also helps in taking care of maintenance planning. The planning could be the preventive maintenance or the usual kind of shutdown or restart processes, etc. So many of our companies have been working with us to see how they can actually take care of the restart plan, the SOPs, etc., which they can actually generate using our software, etc. So certainly, whatever we have done with respect to manufacturability can also be taken care for the maintenance or restart. And I'll probably let Kiran add details to that, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Arun. I think you covered a good portion of it. Yeah. In addition to the assembly processes and machining processes, which typically are seen as a more technology requiring, we also have similar solutions for maintenance. For example, virtual maintenance is something which we propagate, wherein you can see virtually how to do maintenance, whether it's of specific components, specific machinery, and so on and so forth. So that is one aspect of the virtuality of how we can do that. And when it comes to on the shop floor, just like how we can handle the production portion of the story, we also can handle the breakdown maintenance and the preventive maintenance, as Arun was saying. So because there is always a business flow, even if it's maintenance or quality or whichever area it is, and that is very well taken by Delmia suite of products.
Okay. Yeah, fine. I think due to the interest of time, we'll have to stop it here. There are a few more questions which I think we can answer offline. We'll arrange to send it to the individual speakers and we'll send the answers to the attendees. So thank you very much to all of you, Kiran, Bhavesh, and Arun, and thanks to the resources team and thanks to all the attendees for taking out their time to attend this. Over to you, Anvita.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Jitkar. And now, before closing, I'd like to thank all our speakers, Mr. Bhavesh Kumar, Mr. Arun Rao, and Mr. Kiran Devekar. And before ending this, I would like to highlight some of the key takeaways from our sessions today for our audience, which were said by our speakers itself. Um, so throughout the session, so Mr. Arun Rao very rightly highlighted that there is a need for motivation and need for maximizing production with the available technology and workforce for the present given situation. There is a real need to innovate in the days to come. Mr. Kiran Devekar very rightly said that usage of technology is going to be much more important than it was in the past, and cloud is going to be the future. Mr. Kumar very aptly put it that cost reduction will be the focus throughout, and there will be a steep upturn in the use of simulation. And coming back to Mr. Kiran Devekar's answers during the panel discussion, he very rightly highlighted that skilling, upskilling, and reskilling will be very important because the workforce is decreasing. More will be expected from the available workforce, and an organization will need to reskill to retain their talents. And And finally, for closing, Mr. Arun Rao lastly, very rightly said it in the last question, which was posed by Mr. Jitkar on the attributes of winning plant, that the three main attributes would be prioritized. First would be prioritizing employee health. Second would be saving costs, which will be essential. And third would be taking care of risk management and plans for the future to um, sustain in case something similar happens in the future. So with this, I would like to conclude the session. Before going away, I would like to, of course, give a special thanks to all our speakers for making their time out and doing the presentation, giving insights on how skilling, reskilling, and employee health is priority in the time to come. And other than that, a special thanks to the Sol Systems, Mr. Santanu Bhattacharya, who's the India PR and Communication Lead at the Sol Systems, and Mr. Sri Harsha, who's the Marketing Director India at the Sol Systems, for all the behind the scene efforts. There was a lot of efforts that went into putting up these presentation and coordination. So a big thanks to Mr. Sri Harsha and Mr. Santanu. And lastly, the webinar wouldn't have been a big success without the audience staying tuned and asking all the questions and being completely engaged throughout the event with the poll questions and the questions they asked. Now, before I end this event, I would like to let our audience know that Publish Industry India is soon coming out with the virtual edition of its flagship event, International Automotive Manufacturing Summit 2020 on June 23rd. We will send you the registration links for it shortly. Thank you and bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.